Hello everyone, very nice to meet you and welcome to your first seminar of Gender and Power in Asia. My name is Masafumi and I will be the subject coordinator of Gender and Power in Asia for this semester. So this is my contact detail, and obviously I'm in Perth at the moment, so the easiest way for you to contact me is through email, and you are very much welcome to contact your seminar convener, Olive, for any questions first, and she'll be very happy to help you. So let me talk a little bit about myself. I did my PhD in Japanese popular culture and fashion, and particularly in relation to gender. And I have been doing research in Japanese popular culture since. Also, I've been teaching in such areas as Japanese literature and culture and history, Asian popular culture, international relations, and gender history of Japan. So obviously, Japan is my expertise, and I'm very excited to learn more about Asia other than Japan through this subject with you. So yes, hi. And I'm very excited to meet you when I go to Hong Kong and have a couple of classes with you in November. So I can't really wait for that. So what is Gender and Power in Asia class like? So how many of you have read the unit outline? Well, hopefully all of you have read the unit outline, which is a very important document. It's a kind of contract between you and the university. So as indicated in the unit outline, it is a seminar-based class, which means that instead of a lecture like me giving a formal presentation every week, most of the discussion takes place between students, that is between you. I will give a number of short presentations each week through like this kind of video to explain some of the concept or asking questions to stimulate the discussions. And Olive will do the same in your physical class in Hong Kong. But you, with Olive in charge, are expected to be present, to actively participate, and focus on the subject chosen for the seminar, and pose questions of your own and also come up with possible answers to queries of others. So you are encouraged to share your opinions about the topic, as well as I want you to attempt to give your version of answers to questions that are posed by your friends in class. Okay? And aims, like why study gender in Asia? As indicated in the unit outline, there are two main aims for this subject, but I also condensed these two aims into 5 key terms, which are first, to explore gender as a biological fact, as well as social culture constructions, and to see conceptions of gender are embedded in our everyday culture. So gender is really important to us in our everyday life, and that is why it is important to look at gender. To observe gender not only as oppression and violence, but also resistance and agency. So particularly social culture conceptions of gender tends to be a little bit negative. But this unit allows us to think like a positive side of gender as well. So sometimes gender is used to resist and challenge like more kind of stereotyped ideas or conceptions in straightforward and sometimes in more playful ways. That's what we're going to look at through this unit. And to avoid falling into simple assumptions about Asia, as we all know, Asia is not monolithic. It's incredibly diverse, and that diversity has a lot to teach us. And finally, to enhance our understanding that not only concepts of gender, but also of Asian cultures and sometimes more broadly. So these are the 5 key terms that we won't be able to do or achieve by the end of this unit or semester. And for the focus of this unit, we look at East Asia, like China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, and Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia and Singapore. Because Asia can be like really diverse, like it's basically the world's largest continent, so we can't really talk about every part of Asia. So we kind of limit our focus on these like parts of Asia which are more familiar to us. But you're encouraged to offer wider Asian perspectives in the course of the seminars, if you can. So if you know a lot about like India or Pakistan or like Malaysia, then you're welcome to bring your knowledge to class and share it with others in your class. Okay? And assessment tasks. In order to successfully pass this subject, there are 4 things you need to do. The first thing is seminar participation, which is 20% of the whole unit. And it's ongoing. It starts from now. And we have a kind of real assessment task on week 5, which is a short written assignment. And it is also for 20%, and it's due Friday of week 5. And you are required to submit your work through LMS. And then we'll have group presentation, which is another 20, and this will happen in class on weeks 10 and 11. And finally, we have the final research essay, which is 40%, and it's due Friday of the week 13. Okay? So we're going to talk about these assessment tasks as we go. But today, I want to kind of focus on seminar participation. So as I said, like you're required to participate and engage in seminars every week. So you get a really like small points if you come to seminars every week but didn't say anything. But in order to get more points, I really want you to engage in discussions and activities in class. And if you're a little bit shy to share your opinions to class or to speak in class, we also have a lot of small group discussions or group activities. And if you participate in these like small group activities, then you still get points. Okay? And I want you to remember that if you submit your assessment tasks late, then there will be a penalty of 10% of the total mark allocated for the assessment item being deducted per day for the first 7 days. So 10% a day will be taken away if you are late in submitting your work. And after 7 days, you will get no points, even if you submit like a wonderful work. So make sure that you submit your assessment tasks on time. And if you can't, then apply for special consideration, because we can't give you extension unless you apply for it and are granted special consideration. So if something happens, apply for special consideration as soon as possible. And make sure that you won't submit your work late, because I don't really want you to lose points just because you submit your work 1 or 2 days late. Okay? And this is a class schedule. As you can see, on week 5, we'll have the first short assessment task, which is 20%. And on that week, we have no class because of a public holiday. And as you can see, we have like we spend 2 weeks on the one topic, so we'll have 5 topics for 10 study weeks. And on week 9, starting on the 4th of November, I will be in Hong Kong to have 3 classes with you. So these 3 topics will be on the same week. Then we have like student group presentation weeks for the next 2 weeks, which also will be like a review of topics in a workshopping final essay. And you might have guest lectures to talk about issues that relates to gender and power in Asia. And your final essay is due the 6th of December. Okay? So what I want you to do now is introducing each other, because we're going to be in the same class for the next 12 weeks or so. So it's really good for every one of us to know each other a little bit. So what I want you to do is to tell us about your name, what degree you are majoring, and anything you are interested about Asia. Perhaps like something different other than Hong Kong. So for example, you can tell us about your favorite pop stars, places in Asia that you have been to or wish to visit, or favorite Asian cuisine or dish, and what you expect to learn from this subject. And if you want, your gender. Like, don't tell us if you don't want to, but if you or if you don't feel comfortable. But if you feel comfortable, then tell us your gender. So I hand over to Olive to take in charge of introducing each other section. So here we go. Okay, so I guess we know a little bit about each other by now. So let's move on to today's topic, which is a kind of introduction to the idea of gender. So what is gender? What I'm going to do is to show you a very short clip, or 2 short clips actually, of Indian individual who identifies herself or himself as flexible gender. So I want you to think about particularly what is gender and how it is different from biological sex or biological gender. So let's have a look at these clips. Okay, so what did you think? So do you see a difference between sex and gender? And are they different? Anyone who wants to share your opinions about the difference between sex and gender? Like, if there's any? Or do you think they are different? Like, there's a difference between sex and gender? Okay. So, physical difference between male and female change over lifespan. So early stage of development male and female bodies are relatively undifferentiated. So if you think about children, we tend to identify them as first and foremost as children rather than like a boy or girl or male or female, because they don't have much obvious physical difference. So it changes like as we grow. And the biological sex is also determined by chromosomes, for example, XX for females and XY for males, or hormones like estrogen or progesterone for females and testosterone for males. But these hormones are not really a clear, reliable measure to see a difference between male and female, because they're biologically assigned men who have a high level of estrogen or female hormones. And we also have biologically assigned females who have a very high level of testosterone. So these are not really a reliable source to decide which are men and which are women. And internal and external genitalia like vulva, clitoris, vagina for assigned females, and penis and testicles for assigned males. But again, these are not so much a reliable source than we tend to assume, because biological sex can be seen as a spectrum or range of possibilities. And one example to indicate that is individuals who are intersex. So not all bodies conform to male or female duality. That we need to be careful about. So what is gender? Gender gained popular usage in the 1960s and 1970s through civil rights and a feminist movement. And why was that? Why gender different from biologically assigned sex? It was because of a realization that inequalities between men and women were not an inevitable consequence of biological difference. So, for example, you can think about a pay gap between men and women. So, there are like male workers and female workers who are doing exactly the same work. But in many situations, female workers tend to get paid less than male workers. And since they're doing exactly the same work, it shouldn't be because of their biological difference. But it's more likely because of the perception of gender, like they're perceived as males and they get paid more, and if they're perceived as females, and they might get paid less. So inequalities and differences produced socially, like this, like a gender pay gap, could therefore be changed, because these are not based on biological sex. So they are not really fundamental or fundamentally fixed. And civil rights and feminist activists also argue that the body is not just a machine that manufactures difference, but difference also has a socio-cultural cause. So gender is a kind of way of thinking about the beliefs and expectations ascribed to people with certain physical characteristics. So that's how gender can be different from biological sex. Okay? So in other words, sex is a biological difference, and a gender is what cultures make of that difference. That's a kind of a really simplistic or simple definition of how sex is different from gender and vice versa. And as we are familiar by now through the readings for this week, I hope you enjoy the readings for this week. Gender is also seen as a performance. Particularly, this idea was made famous by a philosopher, Judith Butler, who was mentioned in 2 of the readings for this week. So gender is also seen as what we do or perform, or what we are taught to perform and do. But what we need to be a little bit careful here is Judith Butler, although she made this idea of gender performativity or gender as a performance famous, she is no way the first person to talk about or to see gender as a performance. So some of you might have heard of a person called Simone de Beauvoir, I guess. So how many of you have heard of Simone de Beauvoir? I'm pretty sure there are a number of people in your class that are familiar with who she is. But Simone de Beauvoir is a French writer, and she published a book called The Second Sex in 1949, in which she said one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And this quote has made really, really like her work famous. And as you can see, even like 40 years before Judith Butler, de Beauvoir was saying that gender was not something that people are born with. Like woman was not born as a woman, but would be made into a woman through how she was educated and how she was told to behave and so on. And we'll talk more about Simone de Beauvoir next week. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I have prepared a number of quizzes that test your understanding of the readings for this week, as well as a couple of activities that will help us familiarize with the idea of gender as a social culture performance. So I will hand over to Olive to have a bit of fun in your class and doing these quizzes and activities. And I'll come back at the end of the seminar to talk a little bit about next week's topic. Okay? So have fun. I'm just skipping these slides that I assume that you've done it in class. So I'm back. So next week, I hope you had a fun for this seminar today. So next week is about, we are going to look at women's movement in Asia. So as we have seen briefly in today's class, the concept of gender as separate from sex has largely been developed by feminist activists. So what is feminism? Like one easy definition of feminism is fighting for women's equality and empowerment, fighting for women's rights and legal reforms in education, property rights, and rights to vote. And the women's movement is also seen as the organized activism by women's groups for the improvement of women's status. So a couple of the questions that we can ask for next week is how the term feminism, which some have seen as a Western term, can be understood across Asia. What do activists challenge or try to change? And what are the limitations? So a question that we can ask for next week is, how might examples like the hijab or the Muslim headscarf help young women in Southeast Asia to form a stronger identification with self-expression, empowerment, and individuality? Or is it more like a symbol of female oppression? That's what we're going to look at next week. So until next week, see you.